have something on your phone, in your past, or in your head that you call privacy, but if someone you loved saw it, it would change how they see you. And that one detail tells me you are not dealing with privacy. You are dealing with secrecy. And the difference is not moral, it is mechanical. Quick thing before we go deeper. We are building toward 1,000 subscribers, and your subscription genuinely helps us reach more people who actually want psychology that is not watered down. And if this hits a nerve, tap like too. It tells the algorithm this is worth spreading. Okay. You have felt this split before. There are things you keep to yourself, and it feels clean, even healthy. And then there are things you keep to yourself, and it feels heavy, like you are managing a small crime scene in your own life. Same behavior on the surface, different internal physics. This is not just about relationships, it is about how your mind allocates trust, how your nervous system tracks threat, and how your identity gets stitched together over time. And once you see the mechanism, you can predict something most people miss. Secrecy does not just hide information from other people, it changes the kind of person you become while you are hiding it. Here is what is actually happening. Privacy is a boundary, secrecy is a strategy. That sounds like semantics until you test it. A boundary exists to protect your attention, your dignity, your unfinished process. A strategy exists to control other people's beliefs about you. Privacy says, this is mine for now. Secrecy says, I need you to hold a false model of me so I can keep access to something, avoid punishment, or preserve a certain identity. Notice the pattern here. Privacy is oriented toward the self. Secrecy is oriented toward the audience. You can feel the difference in your body. With privacy, you feel firm. With secrecy, you feel vigilant. Vigilance is the giveaway. Vigilance means your brain is running continuous risk calculations. What could they notice? What did I say last time? Did I leave evidence? Do I need a cover story? That is not a boundary. That is surveillance. Now here is where it gets interesting. The mind does not store secrets like a file in a cabinet. It stores them like an active process, more like an app running in the background draining your battery. There is research on this in the self-control and cognition world. Concealment increases cognitive load. You have fewer working memory resources for everything else because part of your mind is doing threat management. That is why secrecy makes people irritable, foggy, and weirdly exhausted even when nothing is happening. Something is happening. The secret is happening. Think about this for a second. If privacy is a closed door, secrecy is a door you keep checking because you are not sure it is locked. And the reason it is so hard to talk about is that both can look identical from the outside. Two people can say, I just like to keep things private. One is protecting autonomy. The other is protecting an illusion. So how do you tell the difference without relying on guilt or moralizing? You look at three signals: intention, counterfactual disclosure, and internal cost. Intention is simple. Are you withholding to preserve your space or to preserve someone else's belief? Not their feelings, their belief. There is a difference. You can protect someone's feelings while still staying aligned with reality. Secrecy is when reality itself is what you are trying to manage. Counterfactual disclosure is the most diagnostic question I know. If the truth came out in a neutral way, with no drama, no punishment, no consequences, would you feel relief or panic? Relief suggests privacy. Panic suggests secrecy. Because what you are panicking about is not the content. It is the collapse of the version of you that other people are interacting with. And internal cost. Does withholding make your life simpler or more complex? Privacy simplifies. You do not have to perform. Secrecy complicates. You have to track narratives, timelines, receipts, facial expressions. And secrecy creates what psychologists call self-monitoring on overdrive. You become a manager of impressions instead of a person. Let me show you what I mean with a scenario that looks innocent. You do not tell your friend about a job interview because you do not want to jinx it and you want to process it alone. That is privacy. The intention is self-regulation. If it came out, you would probably shrug. The internal cost is low. Now, you do not tell your partner you are texting an ex because you know it would change how safe they feel, and you want the benefits of both worlds, the comfort of your partner and the stimulation of the ex. That is secrecy. The intention is to preserve a belief. If it came out, you would go cold. And the internal cost is high because you now have to choreograph reality. But I want to push this deeper because the real difference is not just behavioral, it is neurological and relational. Privacy maintains a coherent self. Secrecy splits the self. When you hide something strategically, you have to build at least two versions of the story, the public version and the private version. Over time, you also build two versions of you, the one who is known and the one who is real. That split is not just philosophical, it creates measurable tension. In clinical psychology, you see this in shame dynamics. Shame is not just feeling bad. Shame is the felt sense that if you are fully seen, you will be rejected. Secrecy is often a shame management tool. It is an attempt to be loved without being known. And that is why secrecy is addictive. Not because it is exciting, but because it temporarily reduces anxiety. You conceal, anxiety drops. The brain learns concealment equals safety. That is basic negative reinforcement. It is the same learning loop that makes avoidance so sticky in anxiety disorders. The relief is immediate, and that trains the behavior. But the loop has a hidden tax. Every time you get relief from concealment, you also teach your brain that honesty is dangerous. You are literally conditioning yourself to fear transparency. Stay with me, because the next part recontextualizes everything. The most important question is not what are you hiding? It is, what relationship are you trying to have with reality? Privacy is compatible with reality. Secrecy requires reality distortion. When you keep something private, you are not demanding that other people live in a false world. You are just reserving access. When you keep a secret, you are often forcing other people to make decisions with missing or manipulated information. That matters because trust is not just an emotion. Trust is a decision-making tool. Here is a novel way to think about trust that makes this obvious. Trust is a model. When someone trusts you, they are running a simulation of you in their mind to predict your behavior. The more accurate the model, the safer they feel. Secrecy corrupts the data feeding that model. So it is not merely that they would be upset if they knew, it is that they are making life choices based on an inaccurate simulation. That is why people get disproportionately angry when a secret comes out, even if the secret itself seems small. They are not only reacting to the information, they are reacting to the realization that their brain has been running a faulty model for months or years. It is like discovering your map was wrong and you have been walking in the wrong direction the whole time. The anger is the nervous system recalibrating. Now watch what happens when we apply this to modern life. Social media trains a bizarre form of secrecy that masquerades as privacy. People say, I just do not share much, but they are not protecting space. They are curating a narrative. And then they feel exhausted by a life that is supposedly public but feels strangely lonely. Because curated identity reduces intimacy. The audience sees a polished avatar, not a person, and the creator knows it, so they get attention without being met. That is one of the most under-discussed psychological costs of online self-presentation. You can become famous and still feel unknown because the famous thing is not you. But there is an even subtler place secrecy shows up, and this is where I think most smart people get trapped. You can keep secrets from yourself. You do it through what I would call selective privacy, where you are not lying, you are just never looking directly at the thing. You keep yourself busy. You keep your explanations vague. You keep your calendar full. And you tell yourself you are just a private person. But what you are actually doing is avoiding an identity update. An identity update is when you absorb new information about yourself and let it change your self-concept. For example, realizing you are in the wrong career. In realizing you do not love someone the way you pretend you do. Realizing you are the common denominator in your conflicts. Those are psychologically expensive updates, so instead, people maintain secrecy toward themselves. They do not gather evidence. They do not ask questions. They do not let the thought finish. And the cost is the same as interpersonal secrecy, cognitive load, fragmentation, and vigilance. Only now the vigilance is internal. You become jumpy around your own emotions. You flinch at your own thoughts. That is not privacy. That is internal surveillance. Now flip everything I just said, because there is a paradox that changes how you should use this. Not all secrecy is bad. Some secrecy is protective, even ethical. If you are planning to leave an abusive situation, secrecy is not manipulation. It is safety strategy. If you are holding someone else's confidential story, secrecy is loyalty. If you are part of a marginalized group and disclosure increases danger, secrecy is adaptive. The mechanism is different. The intention is not to control someone's belief for personal gain. It is to reduce harm under asymmetric risk. So the line is not secrecy versus privacy as good versus bad. The line is whether you are creating informed consent in the people your life affects. That phrase, informed consent, usually belongs to medicine or research. But it is the cleanest way to draw the psychological boundary. Privacy says, you do not have access to this part of me, but the parts of my life that affect your choices are still truthful. Secrecy says, you do not have access. And also, I am going to benefit from you making choices you would not make if you had accurate information. That is the moral and psychological core. It is about agency. Secrecy often steals agency quietly. Here is the last layer, and it is the one that actually changes your behavior. Your brain tracks privacy and secrecy using different emotional currencies. Privacy is funded by self-respect. Secrecy is funded by fear and appetite. Self-respect says, I am allowed to have an interior life. Fear says, I cannot survive being seen. Appetite says, I want the reward without the cost. That is why secrecy clusters around 3 zones: sex, money, and status. Not because people are evil, because those are the 3 zones where social punishment is intense and rewards are high. Evolutionarily, those domains decide mating, survival, and hierarchy. So secrecy becomes a tool to hack the social system. Once you see that, you can do something practical that is not a cliché, like just be honest. You can run a 3-question audit anytime you are unsure. First, if this was discovered tomorrow, would the primary damage be emotional discomfort, or would it be a real revision of how others understand the agreements in our relationship? Discomfort is normal. Agreement revision is the secrecy flag. Second, am I withholding because I need time to process, or because I need time to build a defense? Processing moves toward eventual clarity. Defense moves toward thicker lies. Third, does keeping this hidden make me feel more like myself or less? Privacy tends to increase coherence. Secrecy tends to make you act. And acting long enough becomes a personality. And here is the part people do not expect. The opposite of secrecy is not oversharing. The opposite of secrecy is clean boundaries plus clean reality. You can be an extremely private person and still be radically honest. Radical honesty does not mean reporting every thought. It means refusing to benefit from someone else's false belief about you. It means you do not build intimacy on corrupted data. If you want a single sentence that captures the difference, it is this: privacy protects your inner life. Secrecy protects your external image. So the next time you feel that urge to clamp down, do not ask, "Am I allowed to keep this to myself?" Of course you are. Ask the sharper question: am I protecting my space, or am I protecting a story? Because if it is a story, you will pay for it twice. Once in the energy it takes to maintain it, and again in the slow erosion of trust, not even if nobody ever finds out. Your nervous system knows when you are living beside the truth instead of inside it. If this changed how you see your own boundaries, I would genuinely like to hear what you noticed in the comments. And this week, just watch yourself in one moment. When you choose not to say something, notice whether you feel grounded or guarded. Privacy feels like a door you close. Secrecy feels like a door you hold shut.